The town had gathered like vultures behind the livery yard fence. Men with whiskey breath and hats pulled low, women watching from doorways, pretending not to. Calder had only come for nails and salt. He wasn't looking for anyone's sin to fix, but the shouting pulled him in before he could turn away. Debt bride, $3 owed to the mercantile. Any man willing to take her keeps her name clear. A preacher's voice cracked like old timber. The woman stood barefoot on a crate, hair tangled, face shadowed by a torn bonnet. The rope around her wrists wasn't tight, but it might as well have been iron. Someone laughed. No takers? Not even for free? Calder's hand tightened on the brim of his hat. He should have walked on. He'd seen this kind of cruelty before. Men turning pain into a show. But the woman didn't cry, didn't plead. She just stared ahead, jaw locked, as if she'd already left her body behind. A drunk stumbled forward, reaching for her ankle. She flinched. The crowd roared. Calder moved before thought caught up. His voice cut through the noise. I'll take her. The laughter stopped. Coins clinked into the preacher's palm. The man nodded once, almost relieved to be done with it. Calder walked to the crate, cut the rope, and handed her his coat. She didn't thank him. Just stepped down, quiet as smoke, her bare feet sinking into the mud. They left under the sound of whispers. By the time they cleared the edge of town, the light was dying fast. Clouds rolled low, heavy with snow. Calder kept the wagon steady while the woman sat beside him, wrapped in his coat, staring at nothing. What's your name? He asked after a mile. Mara, she said, voice rough, barely there. He nodded once. Nothing more to say. The wind swallowed the rest. When the first flakes hit the reins, he knew they wouldn't make the crossing before dark. The mountains loomed ahead, black ridges cutting the sky. He turned the horses off the main trail, toward the line of pines he knew too well. By the time they reached the cabin, snow was thick enough to bury the wagon wheels. Calder helped her down. She swayed once, caught herself, said nothing. He led her inside. The cold came with them. He struck a match. The flame caught slow, flickering against rough log walls and a rusted stove. Shadows twisted across her face, pale skin smudged with dirt, eyes too large, too quiet. Sit, he muttered. She did. He poured water into the kettle, fed wood into the stove until it roared. The sound filled the room like breath returning. Behind him, cloth rustled. She'd folded his coat and laid it beside her knees. Her hands trembled not from cold but from control breaking. She pressed them together hard until the shaking stopped. Calder turned away. The firelight caught a glint at her throat, a silver chain disappearing beneath her collar. He almost asked about it, then didn't. Outside, the wind screamed through the chimney. He remembered another winter, another woman singing against a storm's howl, a voice soft and warm through cabin walls. His mother's voice. The memory vanished as quick as it came. He tossed another log into the stove, the sparks rising like fleeting ghosts. Mara's eyes followed them. Why'd you do it? She asked softly. He didn't look up. Didn't like the crowd. That was all. The storm pressed harder against the walls, demanding to be heard. Inside, only the fire answered, crackling. Restless, alive. Calder pulled his chair near the window, rifle across his knees, and watched snow erase their tracks from the world. Mara leaned near the warmth, silent, small against the wide dark. Neither knew it yet, but the storm outside wasn't half as fierce as the one they'd just let in. Morning crept in pale and thin through the cracks in the shutters. The storm had left everything muted, the world outside white and still, the world inside breathing smoke and quiet. Calder stirred the coals back to life, the sound of iron scraping against ash echoing too loud in the small cabin. Mara sat on the cot, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes tracking his every move. Her hair was still damp. He'd left a shirt by the stove for her to wear. It hung loose on her frame, sleeves rolled twice. He poured coffee into a tin cup, slid it across the table. Drink. She hesitated, then took it. The cup rattled softly against the wood. No thanks, no questions. Just silence thick as frost between them. Outside, wind whispered through pine needles. Not angry now, just tired. Calder stepped to the window. Snow was piled halfway up the fence. The wagon was gone, buried. They were stuck for days, maybe more. He caught his reflection in the glass. Gray eyes, unshaven jaw, a man who'd sworn off saving anyone. Behind him, Mara moved quietly, gathering her few belongings. A satchel, a torn shawl, and that silver locket she kept close. always beneath her palm. Wasn't planning to stay long, he said. She looked up. Neither was I. Something in her tone, not defiance, not fear, just truth. He turned back to the window, pretending it didn't matter. By midday, the rhythm of necessity took over. He chopped wood. She swept the floor. She found a tin of beans, boiled them slow. When she handed him a bowl, he noticed her hands again, raw around the knuckles, skin cracked from cold. You ever worked stock before? No, she paused. But I can learn. He nodded once. That was enough. The cabin filled with quiet sounds, spoon against tin, snow sliding from the roof, her breathing syncing with the ticking stove. Calder couldn't remember the last time silence felt like company. Later, while patching a saddle strap, he heard humming. Faint, almost lost beneath the wind, a tune too familiar. His mother's song, the one she'd hum when storms scared him as a boy. He froze, leather taut in his hands. Mara was by the window, head bent, unaware. The melody lingered ghostly. When it faded, the room felt emptier than before. That night, the sky cleared. Stars glinted through the smoke hole, sharp as ice. Calder stepped outside, boots sinking deep into untouched snow. The world looked clean again, though he knew better. He followed the fence line, eyes tracing movement on the ridge. A lone rider, far off, motionless for a moment before disappearing behind the trees. A prickle ran through him. When he returned, Mara was sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. The locket rested in her open hand. Inside, he caught the faint glint of something. A miniature portrait, maybe, but he couldn't see clearly before she snapped it shut. Something out there? She asked. Maybe. She nodded, not surprised. There's always something out there. He sat across from her. The fire popped, throwing bursts of light across the walls. Her shadow trembled against the logs. Who gave you that? He asked, motioning to the locket. She looked up, eyes unreadable. A woman I once knew. Her tone left no space for more. Calder leaned back, staring into the fire until it blurred. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying the faint sound of hooves, or maybe memory, across the frozen hills. Inside, two people sat between silence and storm, not yet knowing both were the same thing. The sky was white and hard as bone when Calder rode down the mountain. The storm had passed, but the air still carried its bite. Hoofbeats echoed sharp against the frozen ground. He didn't tell Mara he was going. She'd only asked once, "You'll come back?" He'd answered with a nod. In town, the world had returned to its habits. Hammers on roofs, the smell of smoke and manure, men talking too loud to cover boredom. He stopped at the general store, traded hides for salt and nails. Then he saw them, papers tacked to the wall beside the door, edges flapping in the wind. Wanted, Mara lay. Below the name, theft, deception, absconding with valuables. Calder's jaw set. He ripped one from the board, folded it into his coat pocket, and stepped outside. Sheriff Dunley stood near the hitching post, hat low, hands in his belt. "You know her?" the sheriff asked. Calder spat into the dust. "No. Rides with a man sometimes, tall, gray coat. Might fit you." Calder mounted up. "Don't see ghosts where there ain't any." He kicked the horse into motion before the man could answer. The road home felt longer. Wind pressed against him like judgment. Every sound, a creak of trees, the rustle of crows, carried warning. Halfway up the ridge, he saw tracks. 2 riders, heavy horses, headed the same way he was. By dusk, the first gunshot cracked through the valley. Calder's breath fogged as he slid off the horse, drawing his rifle. Smoke drifted near the barn. He ran. Mara stood in the doorway, clutching the shotgun with both hands. 2 men were circling the yard, shadows against the snow. One shouted, "Hand her over, Win." "Ain't worth dying for a thief." Calder's voice was quiet, steady. "You're trespassing." The next shot shattered the lantern by the door. Light spilled and died. He fired once, dropped one of them to his knees. The other lunged behind the trough, firing wild. Mara's breathing came in ragged bursts. She stepped forward, shoulders shaking, pulled the trigger, the blast echoing off the hills. The man screamed, fled into the trees, then silence. Only the hiss of the wind through splintered wood. Calder crossed the yard, took the shotgun gently from her hands. Her fingers wouldn't let go at first. He pried them loose one by one. She looked up at him, eyes wild, lips bloodless. "You shouldn't have. Someone had to." Her voice broke. You'd have been killed. He looked at her then, truly looked. The tremor in her jaw, the way she stood her ground despite it, the courage she hadn't meant to show. Inside, he said. They sat by the fire, both bleeding in small ways. He cleaned a scrape on her shoulder, the cloth stained pink. She didn't flinch. They'll come back, she whispered. I know. Her gaze flicked toward the locket lying on the floor, chain broken, clasp open. Calder bent to pick it up. The tiny portrait inside caught the firelight. A woman's face, kind and familiar. The world went still. His hand trembled. He'd seen that face once, a long time ago, framed in the doorway of a house before it burned. His mother's eyes. He looked up at Mara. Where'd you get this? She blinked, confused. It was given to me, years ago. The words hit like snowmelt running cold through old wounds. Calder said nothing. The fire crackled between them, loud as gunfire. Outside, wind shifted east, dragging clouds over the moon. The storm was gone, but something else had started. Deeper, quieter, far less merciful. The fire burned low, blue at the edges. Calder hadn't moved for an hour. The locket sat on the table between them, chain twisted, catching light with every flicker. Mara broke the silence first. It's not what you think. He didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the tiny portrait inside, the woman's face drawn in faded ink, her smile half gone but unmistakable. His mother. Where did you get this? His voice came out flat, scraping the quiet. I told you, she said, clutching her shawl. It was given to me. I didn't steal it. Who? Her throat tightened. A woman. Years back, before the war ended. She said her son was still out there. She. Calder rose, the chair legs screeching across the floor. Say her name. I don't know it, she whispered. She was sick when I found her. She died in the snow. The wind outside moaned through the cracks in the logs like a voice remembering. Calder pressed a hand to the table to steady himself. His mind flicked through half-buried memories. His mother's humming, the shape of her hands in lamplight. The last time he saw her silhouette against a doorway as his father shouted her name. Then, nothing but years of silence. He walked to the window. Snow had started again, a slow drift over the prints in the yard, blood and boot marks fading together. You expect me to believe this? I don't expect anything, she said. But I didn't lie. A noise broke through the wind, hooves faint and fast. Calder lifted his rifle and moved to the door. Mara stood, the color draining from her face. They came back, she murmured. Two shadows cut across the ridge, torches flaring in the dark. Get inside the stall, Calder ordered. Don't speak unless I tell you, she hesitated. I can fight. He looked at her, the bruise on her temple, the shaking hands still raw from the shotgun's recoil. Not tonight. She went anyway, slipping into the barn's dark mouth. Calder stepped into the yard. Snow whipped sideways, stinging his eyes. You boys never learn, he muttered. The first man fired. The shot went wide, sparking off the trough. Calder dropped to one knee and returned fire. One horse screamed and bolted. The second rider circled, shouting curses into the storm, then a sound behind him, the barn door opening. Mara holding the lantern high, light spilling gold through the snow. Inside, he shouted. No! Her voice carried over the wind. You can't see in this light. Let me. The gun went off before she could finish. The lantern shattered, fire spilling into straw. The barn ignited like dry breath. Calder ran through the smoke, dragging her away from the flames. Together they fell hard into the snow. She coughed, clutching her chest, light from the burning barn flickering over her face. He looked down at her, half furious, half breaking. You could have died. So could you, she said, voice raw. They sat there, shivering, the world lit orange around them. The last rider turned and vanished into the dark, the storm swallowing him whole. When it was over, they stayed outside until the fire dimmed. Ash drifted like gray snow. Calder's breath came slow, shallow. Mara reached into her pocket and pressed the locket into his hand. She wanted me to find him, she whispered. Said he'd be stubborn, angry, but kind underneath. Said I'd know by his eyes. Calder looked up, snow melting on his lashes. He didn't speak. The only sound was the dying crackle of wood and the steady rhythm of their breathing. Two survivors framed in smoke and dawn's first hint of light. Morning came slow. The sky was washed pale, the kind of quiet blue that follows a storm's rage. Smoke curled from what was left of the barn, black threads unraveling into still air. Calder moved among the wreckage, boots crunching through frozen ash. Each step sounded heavier than it should. Behind him, the cabin door creaked open. Mara stood wrapped in his coat, her hair tangled, face streaked with soot. She carried 2 tin cups of coffee. He took one without a word. Steam rose between them, white against the cold. The silence wasn't sharp anymore. "Just tired. They won't come back," he said finally. "No." She looked toward the ridge where the riders had vanished. "But they'll talk. Let 'em." The words came out steady, but his hand shook when he lifted the cup. He stared at the horizon, long stretches of snow, the sun trying to break through. Something in his chest began to ease like a frozen hinge catching its first turn. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled, soft and human. Calder set his rifle on the wall. The gesture felt final somehow. By midday, the sky cleared. They worked side by side without speaking, hauling broken boards, stamping out the last embers. She found a saddle blanket half burned, brushed the ash off and folded it anyway. He patched the fence, driving nails through wood still warm from the fire. When she passed him a hammer, their fingers touched. Just a second. Enough. Later, as the sun dipped low, he found her sitting on the porch steps, the locket open in her hands. Inside, the tiny portrait glowed faintly under the light, that same familiar face, his mother's eyes staring up from a lifetime away. "She saved me once," Mara said quietly. "Found me half dead near the river. I never knew her name till now." Calder sank onto the step beside her. The boards groaned beneath their weight. "She left when I was a boy. I thought she died out there. She almost did." Mara turned the locket, chain dangling like a thread between past and present. "She talked about you. Said she hoped you'd forgive her one day." Calder's throat tightened. The words came slow. "Guess I never gave her reason to think I would." "You just did." They sat watching the last of the light fade over the valley. The snow glittered gold, the kind of beauty that hurt to look at. Calder felt the ache of years unclench inside him, not gone, just no longer in control. After dusk, they shared bread, the last of the beans, and quiet laughter that came from exhaustion more than joy. It still sounded right. Mara rose, fetched a needle and thread, and began mending his torn sleeve by the lamplight. He watched her hands move, precise, gentle, scarred. She didn't speak. Neither did he. When she finished, she fastened the locket back around her neck. He reached out, fingers brushing the clasp. "Keep it," he said. "She'd want that." Mara met his eyes. "And you?" He hesitated. "I reckon I'd rather see it where it's been cared for." Something unspoken passed between them then, not love. Not yet, but something steadier, outside. The night turned clear, stars sharp above the pines. The wind carried the smell of thawing earth. Calder stepped onto the porch, breathed deep, and for the first time in years didn't feel alone. Behind him, Mara hummed that same old lullaby. It filled the cabin with a warmth no fire could make. He closed his eyes, let it carry him. The song drifted through the doorway, over the snow, into the open silence, and as the first dawn light touched the fields, he found himself humming along.